What would you do if the person who cleans your floor every day was suddenly humiliated in front of hundreds, but held a secret that could silence an entire ballroom? Would you laugh with the crowd? Or would you dare to wonder, what if she isn't who we think she is? The golden chandeliers sparkled above a lavish ballroom filled with the laughter of the city's wealthiest elite. Glittering gowns swept across the marble floor. Violins played in the background, and servers in crisp uniforms hurried to refill glasses of champagne. It was a night of extravagance, a charity gala hosted by Victor Harrison, one of the richest men in the state. Victor loved one thing more than his money: showing off his money. Standing tall in his custom Italian suit, he raised his glass and declared loudly, "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, let us celebrate wealth, power, and legacy." The crowd erupted into applause. Everyone adored him, or at least pretended to, but behind the curtains, quietly arranging the flowers and sweeping away crumbs from the tables, was Clara Johnson. A black maid in a simple uniform, worn shoes, and tired hands. She blended into the background like she always did, invisible among diamonds and designer perfumes, until one careless accident changed everything. Clara was adjusting the edge of a long silk tablecloth when she accidentally bumped into a tray. A champagne glass wobbled, tipped, and shattered on the floor with a loud crash. The music paused. Heads turned. Silence filled the room. Victor's eyes narrowed as he walked over, his voice echoing across the hall. Well, what do we have here? Our little maid trying to make a scene?" He smirked, and the crowd chuckled nervously. Clara bent down immediately, picking up the shards with her bare hands. Her fingers shook, but she kept quiet. Victor wasn't done. He thrived on moments like this. Public humiliation gave him a sick satisfaction. "Tell me, Clara," he sneered, "do you think you belong here? Among us?" Clara froze. Every eye was on her. Her chest tightened, but she managed to whisper, "I didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't," Victor interrupted sharply. "Because you people never mean to. You just ruin things." The words cut through the air like knives. Gasps, whispers, and muffled laughter spread across the room. And then Victor spotted his son Daniel standing near the orchestra. Handsome, tall, and nervous, Daniel had always been shy in front of crowds. Victor raised his voice, pointing at him. "In fact," he said with a cruel grin, "let's make tonight interesting." He turned back to Clara. "Dance with my son, and maybe, just maybe, I'll let everyone here treat you as family for one night." The crowd roared with laughter. Glasses clinked. A few even shouted, "Do it! Let's see!" Clara's face flushed with humiliation. Her trembling hands clenched around the broken glass, cutting her skin. But she didn't cry. Not in front of them. Victor leaned closer, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or are you too ashamed to show us what you really are?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Everyone was waiting, mocking smiles, hungry eyes, eager for a performance. Inside Clara's chest, a storm brewed. Memories of a life she had buried deep began to stir. The rhythm of music, the sound of applause, the rush of being under the spotlight. She had been here before, though not as a maid. Not like this, her heart pounded. Should she accept? Should she walk away? The question echoed in her mind. Would they ever see her worth? Or would this be the night she proved them all wrong? As the violins began again, Clara slowly stood up, her cut fingers leaving tiny red stains on the white cloth. She lifted her chin. Her voice, though soft, carried through the entire ballroom. "If I dance with your son, I promise you, Mr. Harrison, none of you will ever forget tonight," the crowd gasped. Victor's grin faltered for a split second. Daniel's eyes widened. And Clara? She took her first step toward the center of the dance floor. But what the crowd didn't know, what Victor himself didn't know, was that Clara wasn't just a maid. She was once a champion. What if the person you humiliate in front of hundreds carries a past so powerful it could shatter your pride in a single heartbeat? Would you still laugh? Or would you tremble, knowing you pushed the wrong soul too far? The air in the ballroom grew heavy, as if every chandelier crystal absorbed the tension. Clara walked slowly toward the center of the grand floor. Each step echoed, not because of her worn-out shoes, but because of the silence that followed her. Victor Harrison folded his arms, smirking like a man who thought he had already won. "Let's see the maid try to dance," he whispered to his friends, who chuckled cruelly. Daniel, Victor's son, shifted nervously. He hadn't expected his father to drag him into this public mockery. His eyes flicked toward Clara. He saw no shame in her, only an unexplainable fire. Something in her calm, steady steps unsettled him. The orchestra waited for Victor's signal. "Play something." "Dramatic," he ordered with arrogance. Violins began, low and mocking, a rhythm meant to expose the maid's lack of grace. Clara stood at the center, her hands still trembling slightly, but her back straight, her chin lifted. She met Daniel's eyes. For a moment, the room disappeared. "Do not be afraid," she whispered. Daniel blinked. You've danced before?" Clara didn't answer. Instead, she extended her hand. "Shall we?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. A maid daring to invite the heir of Harrison wealth to the floor, it was scandalous. Guests leaned forward, eager to watch the disaster unfold. As Clara took Daniel's hand, her mind drifted back to years ago, when she wasn't a maid at all. The lights, the roar of the crowd, the feeling of spinning under spotlights. She remembered being on stage, her body moving with elegance, winning competitions across states. She had been Clara Johnson, the dance prodigy, whose name appeared in magazines, whose trophies lined entire shelves, until tragedy struck. Her mother's illness had drained the family's savings. Clara quit competing, quit performing, and began working every job she could find, cleaning, serving, anything to keep her mother alive. Dreams died in silence, and she never told anyone at the mansion who she really was. To them, she was just the maid. But tonight, Victor's arrogance had awakened the part of her she buried. Suspense, build-up. The dance begins. The violins rose, and Daniel awkwardly placed his hand on hers. He was stiff, clumsy, already sweating under the gaze of the crowd. Whispers filled the hall. "She's going to embarrass herself." "Can't believe she actually agreed." "This will be delicious." Victor raised his glass, confident the humiliation would be unforgettable. But as the music swelled, Clara closed her eyes. For a split second, she wasn't in the ballroom. She was back on stage in her white gown, feeling the rhythm flow through her veins. And when she opened her eyes, she moved. Her steps were precise, graceful, flawless. She guided Daniel's stiff body with effortless control, turning his awkward shuffles into something almost elegant. Her posture commanded attention, her spins captured light, and her eyes burned with unshakable determination. Gasps echoed. Murmurs rose. The laughter began to die. "Wait, she's not bad." "No, she's incredible." "Who is she?" Daniel himself was stunned. He had never been confident in front of crowds, but Clara's presence gave him strength. She moved like water, leading him without making him feel small. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was alive. Victor's smirk faltered. He leaned forward, gripping his glass tighter. "Impossible," he muttered. Emotional tension, the question in the room. Clara spun gracefully, her maid's uniform flowing like a gown in motion. Each step was a statement. "I am more than what you think I am." Every guest in the room felt it. The shame of their earlier laughter burned their cheeks. The whispers shifted. "Why didn't we know?" She must have been a professional." "What else have we assumed about her?" The question hung heavy. How many times had they judged a person without knowing their story? Victor's face reddened with anger. He wanted this to be her humiliation, but instead it was becoming his own. The music swelled higher, and Clara twirled Daniel with perfect timing. His nerves melted, and for the first time in his life he felt free. He looked at her astonished. "Who are you, really?" he whispered. Clara smiled faintly but didn't answer. "Not yet." The violins reached a pause, holding the room in breathless silence. Clara and Daniel stood in the center, their hands clasped, their posture strong. And in that pause, Clara's eyes met Victor's. For the first time that night, he was the one who felt small. What if the person you mocked, expecting them to stumble, suddenly revealed mastery so breathtaking that it silenced an entire room? Would you still hold your pride, or crumble under the weight of truth you never saw coming? The orchestra hesitated for a second, waiting for Victor's nod to continue. He gave a stiff, annoyed wave. The music swelled again, this time faster, sharper. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Clara inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the rhythm. Her feet moved with precision, each step cutting through the tension like a blade. The wooden floor beneath her felt alive again, just like the stages she once owned. Daniel followed, guided effortlessly by her subtle touch. His earlier awkwardness was gone. Clara's presence made him lighter, freer, as if she carried both their weights. And then she spun, not a timid maid's spin. A dancer's spin, her body twirled flawlessly, the maid's apron fluttering like a trained costume. She landed smoothly, head high, eyes blazing. Gasps filled the air. She's incredible! That's not just practice. That's years of training. Who is she really? The laughter that once filled the hall had died completely. Now there was silence, broken only by stunned murmurs, and the sound of shoes gliding across marble. Clara led Daniel through an elegant turn, his tall frame bending into a rhythm. Victor gripped the edge of his chair. "No," he whispered under his breath. "This isn't happening!" But it was happening. The maid he wanted to humiliate was stealing his spotlight, turning his gala into her stage. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband, "She moves like a professional." Her husband nodded slowly. "I've seen competitions. She's not just good. She's extraordinary." Victor's friends shifted uncomfortably. The spectacle was no longer amusing. It was humbling. Clara's silent power, her hidden truth, begins to leak. As Clara danced, she let herself feel what she had buried. The loss, the sacrifice, the countless nights scrubbing floors instead of standing under lights. She thought of her mother, who once whispered proudly, "You were born to shine, Clara. Don't let anyone dim your light." For years, Clara had hidden that light. Tonight, against her will, Victor had forced her to show it again. And as her body moved with elegance, she realized something. This humiliation had become her weapon. Every spin was defiance. Every step was rebellion. Every move was her way of saying, "You don't get to define me." Emotional connection. Daniel transformed. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. He had never seen such control, such strength, such grace. He whispered mid-turn, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Clara didn't answer directly. Instead, she leaned closer as they glided, her voice steady. "Sometimes people don't listen. Until you show them." Daniel felt his chest tighten. For years, he had lived under his father's shadow, silenced, belittled, made to feel unworthy. Watching Clara, he saw not just a maid, not just a dancer. He saw courage. For the first time, he wanted to fight back too. Suspense peaks, the grand reveal in motion. The music built higher, the violins racing. Clara tightened her grip on Daniel's hand and whispered, "Follow me." And then she leapt. In a single, breathtaking motion, Clara executed a flawless pirouette, transitioning into a dramatic dip with Daniel. The crowd gasped, some even clapping involuntarily. The orchestra, caught in the energy, played louder, faster, as if the music itself bowed to her. Victor stood, face red, veins visible in his neck. "Enough!" he shouted, but no one listened. All eyes were locked on Clara. She lifted Daniel into a perfect finishing pose, the room erupting with stunned applause. For a moment, she wasn't the maid. She wasn't invisible. She was the star. The emotional question, what now? The applause echoed like thunder. People rose to their feet, clapping, some even tearing up. Victor's humiliation was complete, but the question remained heavy in the air. Who was she, really? Clara released Daniel's hand and bowed her head slightly. For a moment, she debated staying silent, keeping her secret safe. But then she looked at Victor. The man who had mocked her, belittled her, used her pain for his entertainment. And she knew she had to speak. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the hall like a dagger. "You asked me to dance, Mr. Harrison. You thought I'd humiliate myself. But before I was your maid, I was a national dance champion. I gave up everything, every trophy, every stage to care for my sick mother. And now I work here to survive. But don't you ever mistake survival for weakness." The room froze. Not a whisper. Not a laugh. Just silence. Daniel looked at her with awe. His eyes said everything: respect, admiration, gratitude. And Victor? For the first time in his life, Victor Harrison had no words. What happens when the truth you tried to bury explodes in front of everyone, stripping away your pride, your power, and your mask? Do you double down on arrogance, or admit you were wrong all along? The ballroom remained frozen in stunned silence. The chandeliers sparkled above, but all eyes were on Clara, the maid who was no maid at all. Her words still echoed. "Before I was your maid, I was a national dance champion." Some guests exchanged guilty looks, ashamed of their earlier laughter. Others whispered in disbelief, realizing they had just witnessed something far greater than humiliation. They had seen resilience. Daniel stood tall beside her, his chest heaving from the dance, but his eyes shone with something new: respect. He looked at his father, then back at Clara. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to stand on the opposite side of Victor Harrison. Victor's rage, the fall of arrogance. Victor's face twisted with rage. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Lies! All lies! She's just a maid. I hired her to clean floors, not to fill people's heads with fairy tales." But the crowd wasn't convinced. They had seen her. They had felt the truth in her movements. One guest, a wealthy socialite, stood up. "Victor, I've seen her face before. She was in magazines years ago. Clara Johnson, the prodigy who won competitions in Chicago and New York. I remember her." A murmur of agreement spread. Heads nodded. The weight of proof crushed Victor's denial. His voice cracked again, weaker this time. "She's nothing. Nothing but—" But before he could finish, Daniel's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Enough, father!" The crowd gasped. No one ever dared to interrupt Victor Harrison, not even his son. Daniel's stand. The turning point. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "All my life you told me I wasn't enough, that I could never carry your legacy. You humiliated me just like you tried to humiliate her. But tonight I saw the truth. Strength isn't about money or pride, it's about courage. And Clara has more of it than you ever will." The words pierced deeper than any dagger. Guests murmured in approval, nodding at Daniel's courage. Victor's empire of arrogance cracked in front of his own people. Clara placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder, steadying him. She could see the years of pain in his eyes, the chains of his father's control finally breaking. The emotional climax. Clara's final words. Clara turned to face the entire ballroom. She didn't raise her voice, but every syllable carried like thunder. "You all laughed when he mocked me. You all waited to see me fail. But remember this: the people you step on today might be the ones who could save you tomorrow. Never judge someone's worth by their uniform or their paycheck. Every person carries a story. And tonight, you saw mine." A hush fell over the crowd. Many lowered their eyes in shame, some even wiping tears. Her words had peeled away their masks of superiority. She added softly, "And for you, Mr. Harrison, you thought dancing with your son would make me family, but you don't get to decide that. Family is built on love, on respect, not on arrogance. Tonight your son chose me as his partner. That choice speaks louder than your wealth ever will." Victor defeated. A silent ending for him. Victor staggered backward, his empire of pride crumbling. He opened his mouth to argue, but the weight of silence pressed against him. The same guests who once worshipped him now looked at him with disgust. The applause began, not for Victor, but for Clara. It started as a ripple, then thundered through the hall as people stood to their feet. Cheers, whistles, clapping that shook the chandeliers. The woman who had been invisible minutes ago now stood as the brightest star in the room. Victor sank into his chair, defeated, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the marble. He was no longer the center of attention. Resolution, a new beginning. Daniel faced Clara, bowing slightly in respect. "You didn't just save me tonight. You saved yourself. I will never forget this." His voice cracked with sincerity. Clara gave him a soft smile. "You don't need to be like your father, Daniel. Dance to your own rhythm. That's where your strength is." The orchestra, inspired, played a softer tune. Guests began to whisper Clara's name with admiration, their earlier cruelty erased by awe. For the first time in years, Clara allowed herself a small tear. Not from pain, but from release. Tonight, she had reclaimed herself. Final emotional question. Life lesson. As the night drew to a close, the ballroom had changed forever. The richest man had been humbled, the invisible maid had become unforgettable, and a son had finally found his voice. But one question lingered in every heart that witnessed it. How many people have we dismissed, mocked, or ignored, never knowing they carried greatness within them? And that question would haunt them far longer than the music.